Welcome to the March for Science Minnesota Everyday Scientist interview series. This is our first on-site interview, and I'm so happy and privileged to have Bob Omontese here with me today. And it's an extra privilege to have him because if you were at the March for Science Minnesota last year, he was one of our speakers. And I have to say, you're one of my favorite speakers.
Thank you.
Your presentation style is so dynamic, and we were so honored to have you last year. So thank you for speaking with me again today.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So you are originally from Nigeria, correct? And you're here at the University of Minnesota on a postdoctorate in veterinary sciences, and you go all over the state of Minnesota, particularly in rural areas, working with dairy cows, right?
Yep.
So I'm curious, that must be an interesting experience, and people may sort of perceive you as this sort of fish out of water, being from Nigeria and going into these rural areas. So could you tell me a little bit about what that experience is like, how people perceive you, and what's the experience like for you?
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to have this interview and to bring you to a beautiful facility like this. Yes, it does sometimes feel like fish out of water, but then it's an opportunity for dialogue, because whenever I go to the dairies, they want to find out where I'm from, and because they don't get to see too many persons looking like me coming to the dairies. So yes, I love the experience. I've always loved to work with animals, and I don't mind going to rural Minnesota to work with them. And I love the opportunity to engage both the farmers and the owners at the site. So,
yeah. Well, that's really wonderful,
Yep.
and I'm sure it's it's a beautiful state. So what a privilege to go around
absolutely.
and tour Greater Minnesota.
That is true.
So I'm standing among these dairy cows, and aside from a consumer of dairy products, I don't know that much about what you do. So could you explain to me what you're doing here in your research and in your work?
Okay.
But an added challenge, because scientists have such a hard time, myself included, saying what we do in a succinct way, I'm going to challenge you to tell me and our viewers what you do in 30 seconds or less.
Okay.
All right?
Okay. I'll try. So I'm a veterinarian and a reproductive physiologist. What I do, or what my research is about, is to develop strategies to improve fertility of dairy cows. So that's what I do.
Wow, I think that was like 15 seconds or something. That is very good, really succinct. I mean, so that's really interesting. So you're helping to improve fertility. Is that a real problem in terms of reproduction for dairy cows?
Yes, so it is a problem, because sometimes dairy cows experience some diseases that affect their ability to reproduce. And if a dairy cow does not reproduce, then you cannot have milk. So it's a very integral component of dairying to ensure that cows reproduce as and when due, so that we can have the continuous flow of milk.
And cheese.
And cheese, which you love.
Please, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So that's such a really niche field, and thinking, I'm sure there are people that want to be veterinarians, but maybe don't think down exactly what that means in terms of helping in reproduction and that type of thing. So is this something that you always wanted to do? Was this always an interest of yours?
Oh yes. I always wanted to be a gynecologist. Let's start from there. But then I found myself in a veterinary faculty.
Okay.
And I decided, okay, since I cannot do reproduction in human beings, I'm going to do it in animals. And so after my veterinary program, I went for a master's and a PhD in animal reproduction, and I focused primarily on fertility strategies to improve reproductive performance of dairy cows. So that's how I got into this beautiful field of research.
Wow. Yeah, I would never know that someone does that for a living. And so, wow, that's really great. So I'm curious, because this is so niche and something that even me as a scientist I'm not familiar with, and so I'm curious, are there things that you wish people understood about science? Are there some misconceptions of what it means to be a scientist and studying in this way?
Oh yes, there's a lot of misconceptions about science and what scientists do. But from my perspective, scientists seek answers to problems. or they're trying to find solutions to existing problems. So, for example, what I do for dairy cows, there's been some decline in fertility because of either diseases or poor welfare, So what I try to do is to use the knowledge that I have from what should be good welfare, good housing, good management, good health to improve fertility for livestock.
Yeah, that's really great. So I'm curious, because you're a postdoc, and for those people who don't know, postdocs is typically funded under some sort of a grant.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, from your perspective of being funded by grants to do research and being an immigrant to this country, do you feel like things are changing politically for what the prospects are for other people that might be interested in following the same path, be it come to the U.S. to study science or to get into a field that's really dependent on funding?
Yes, that is really a very well thought question. And of course, with every political change or dispensation, there's usually focus that may also change. I think for the United States to continue to lead the world in scientific innovation and technological advancement, that we must continue to fund and, in fact, increase funding for science, because that would enable more research to be carried out. That would enable scientists who dedicate their lives to do more experiments, to answer very important questions that would improve the livestock that we have currently. So yes, policies should be enacted by Congress or by those involved to ensure that individuals who have something to contribute to the scientific discourse in the United States should not be prevented, from coming in. And of course, more money, as much as it is possible, should be allocated to science.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So I just want to thank you for spending some time and helping spread the word for March for Science Minnesota. It was such an honor to have you as a speaker last year, and I hope that you'll join us this upcoming, right?
Just sharing.
Yeah. So we have our Rally for Science is on April 14th in the Minnesota State Capitol in St. Paul. Thank you, Dr. Omontese, for speaking with me. As always, I'm Dr. Nicole Morris with March for Science Minnesota. I'm being licked by a cow. And thank you so much for joining us. Until next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.